I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome, everyone, to Linda's Adventures, Council of Thieves, Part 5. Which is not Book 5, but it's Part 5.
Well, we'll get into Book 5.
We sure will, because we're getting to the end of Book 4 now. And by the end, I mean a lot of Book 4 is in the end of Book 4. Because it's a giant dungeon.
Yes. When last we left our heroes, they were about to go into a giant dungeon. The part where we seem to always leave our heroes.
Yes, well, if nothing else, this has made me realize that Council of Thieves is basically do some stuff and then go into a giant dungeon in every part except for Book 6.
Yes.
Yes.
Although Part 5 we inverted and then to do the giant dungeon.
Yeah, so we did it backwards, but as written, it was do some stuff and then go into a giant dungeon.
So, a quick overview of our PCs. We have Carl the Cobbler, Gnome Chaotic Neutral Gnome Sorcerer with a
Red Cap Bloodline.
Crunkfree, the Half-Orc Paladin of Shellen. Alicia, the Tiefling Summoner, alias Angel, the Human Summoner. Laniax.
Or I guess alias Angel, the Human Gladiator, who somehow won a summoning fight, but only cast one summon spell.
Mm-hmm. Laniax's convenient GMPC.
Who's also a Paladin of Shellen.
Red-Black, Half-Elf, Rogue, and Spymaster. We have Stav, the Elf, who was a Paladin of Torag, and I believe I had switched him over to a Paladin of Cerebrate.
He had a crisis of conscience when he refused to help the dwarves who were in trouble in Part 3. Or sorry, at the beginning of Part 4, and so he had a vision from Torag, and he was like, yeah, whatever, and so he switched to Cerebrate.
Yes. And we had previously had Soren, the Human Oracle Bard, but Soren's demise Soren died in Part 4. Eaten by vampires. And that player was about a session from not being able to play with our group anymore anyway, so that was their swan song, and they are no longer going to be appearing in this tale.
Except as a corpse.
Dun dun dun. Alright. So
Soren was accepted into Pathfinder Medical School.
Yes.
As a cadaver.
No, really, the player was going to medical school. So he wasn't going to have time to play with us anymore. He's a doctor now. Because this was a long time ago.
That's true.
Alright, so we were heading into the Nescian Spiral, the basement of Abarian's Folly, the power plant / prison for an Infernal Duke, because if you are an Infernal Duke and you piss off the Thrunes, they might just decide to use you as the power source in a power plant to help keep the lights on and the temperature high in a manor.
Yes, and the water warm.
Yes.
In a manor for some rando mayor who you don't even care about in a city that you don't like that much anymore.
Yep. So thanks to some messing around in the other giant dungeon off of this mayor's manor that the Council of Thieves had been doing.
This dungeon became more vulnerable.
And the pit fiend, Liebdaga the Twin, was beginning to break out of his bonds, which
or as he's sometimes known, Liebdaga the Twit.
Yes. As the PCs would sometimes call him. But basically, this breaking out caused a giant explosion that destroyed the mayor's manor and sent literal pillars of hellfire into the sky. And you have the situation where there were devils working for Liebdaga that are running around, many of whom the PCs have already contended with at this point. You have the Council of Thieves itself, which has been working in the shadows, and it has a big fracture within it where most of its members are now working with the Chamity and Acardrian Revenge, who are looking to take over the organization.
From their own father.
Although
I guess technically not Acardrian's father.
Yeah, technically not Acardrian's father.
He thinks it's his father.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So you got that, and then you also had the situation with vampires that are running about and causing problems. Led by the Master Vampire Elneric Shivinshin, who is also the cause of the Shadow Beast problem. And the PCs had discovered all of this previously, and they even knew where to go at this point to track down Elneric Shivinshin. from the vampire that they had found in the previous place. They had that lead. They were headed that way. They were headed to go there.
We had the MacGuffin. It was called the Morrowfall. It's like the light MacGuffin.
You were gonna go after the Shadow MacGuffin, but then everything exploded, and you guys had to save the day again. Because you're the heroes, and that's how things go.
That's what we do when everything explodes.
Yep. So, they managed to, through a combination of negotiation and battle and exploration, they had managed to make their way up to the entrance to this Nexian Spiral. And the Nexian Spiral is like I said, is a big giant dungeon.
It's basically a spiral that takes you through rooms that are roughly themed on the different levels of hell, but before you sort of get to that part, there's some other stuff that if I recall correctly, was at the beginning where we knew that there were like tiefling wardens that were supposed to be watching over it in theory, but were also probably pretty dissatisfied because they were forced to live in a dungeon.
Yeah, so they had basically the situation there was that you had there was the person who was supposed to keep command of the control rod and make sure that everything kept smoothly working down here, was actually a priestess of Nocticula secretly named Valadnis.
Dun dun dun.
And Valadnis decided, Valadnis decided, she was fed up with being trapped down here and being expected to serve, and it was time for a tiefling uprising. And you know who's totally going to help us with this uprising?
The Redeemer Queen.
Who wasn't the Redeemer Queen yet. Totally, a servant of Nocticula would help us escape, right? So she summoned forth the succubus, and
if I've learned one thing in Pathfinder, it's if someone's vowel sounds is like Alanis, then you don't trust that person, regardless of what consonants are in between. It can be Valadnis or Alasnist or anything like that. They're always bad.
Clearly.
But these tieflings didn't know that, or they did know, but they were just too eager for their freedom.
So the PCs knew when they were coming in here that they were supposed to find
a control rod.
They were supposed to find this Valadnis person who was probably the one who had the Stygian key rod to control the Styx water channels that cooled off basically the reactor, so to speak. Because Styx water, it's totally the safest thing to use in your hell-powered nuclear reactor. But nonetheless. So they were looking for this person. And when they went through, they ran into a wide variety of tiefling thieves who were guarding the place.
Each of which was more similar than the last.
Yes. There were some Cerberus from that had been summoned in from the lair of Mammon to help to guard the vaults.
Erebus.
Yes. And they also found a Vulcan Gathian who was in rather sorry straits.
Broken soul.
Jezeltrix, yes, who had been tortured by Dargentu Veed, who was a wizard who was trying to rework the distribution of power within this place, and make some alterations to the engine, for his own gain.
That's another kind of evil sounding thing. If your last name is like Sneeg or Veed or Gleeg.
Yep.
Or any of those.
Beware
kind of
the double E followed by a consonant. Also.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So the PCs, they had 2 Shell Knight paladins in their group, and were generally very good aligned. So they very much didn't want to fight this Agathion, and they were able to. They did eventually manage to talk him down, and I don't know if it was exactly now or a little bit later, but you guys did manage to get that Agathion sent back to Nirvana, to Shellen's realm where they could receive some assistance, because they were like, yeah, we can't really fix this here, but if you go back to the plane that you're supposed to be from, then surely the other good neutral good outsiders will be able to help you receive the counseling and support that you need.
I think, did we find all these before we got to the tieflings?
These are all in the same basic area. The first tieflings were technically before this, and there were more after that.
They're regular tiefling rogues. Yeah. I think the way that we went, while you're going it by area, we may have gotten to the succubus before we got to the broken soul, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I'm doing them in the order that they appear in the AP, because I can't remember exactly what order you guys did rooms in.
Just like if there's a place and it has a control rod, and then it eventually has a succubus, it's not going to be great, but we still eventually did get the control rod from there.
Yes. You contended with the diabolist Avazi Sarifian, who was the commander of the council agents here, and cleric of Mammon, and generally not really a popular figure because she kind of seems to follow the Zap Brannigan from Futurama school.
Send waves after wave of your own troops at them until they get to the preset kill limit.
It's basically just like, oh yeah, I need my minions to explore this place. Let's just keep sending more minions until some of them eventually don't die and they find some useful information. So people really didn't like working for her.
Look, everyone, it's Dennis, one of the co-authors of the Gen Con special.
Hi, Dennis.
Anyway, so, yeah, she was kind of a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
The succubus was also very dangerous because of the fact that her save DCs were very high.
Yes, she was. And she certainly tried to convince you guys to trust her and to,
and that she wasn't a succubus.
And that she wasn't a succubus. But, the paladins, let's just say, realized that there was something up with her.
Yeah, well, let's just say not only that, but also that the Paladins of Shellen had their own differences. Crunkfree is very cleaning focused. It always says awkward, is a half-orc who loves gardening. But Lainey, the actress and sort of counselor/therapist, is a succubus-born tiefling. And
yes. And she, as one of her major things, promotes healthy relationships and consent.
Yes.
And
actual succubi are a major trigger for her.
Yes. So she was very not happy with this particular succubus, and this particular succubus was not able to convince the PCs that they should just go with the flow, let her go, spend some time with her. No, this was definitely a smitey time, shall we say.
Yes. And then we cleaned the control rod 50 times.
Yes, because the PCs came to their own conclusions about what may have happened with that. But we'll just leave it at that. So the PCs also rescued a person who was a loyalist to the original Council of Thieves faction, who had been sort of caught as a mole and had been imprisoned for later questioning instead of killed, and they were...
This is our first of many loyalists that we wind up rescuing.
Yes. So the first of many loyalists, and Jelky gave them some information about what had been going on inside the Council of Thieves, and by this point at least, because about one part ago the PCs were like, Council of Thieves, I guess they're there somewhere, but now they actually know that, okay, yes,
they're here, and they're having a civil war.
They're having a civil war, and
it's like Marvel's Civil War, except for that it's more definitive.
Yes. They're here, they're having a civil war, and the side that is doing the uprising is willing to do a lot of really shady and destructive things in order to gain power. So they should probably be
shady, much disruptive. It's weird, too, because they allied with... The side that's doing this allied with devils, and the devils are like, here's a good plan. Lots of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And we will betray our contracts and vows and oaths to each other arbitrarily. Not find a loophole. We'll just not do it. And and the devils were like majorly advising on this, and like, this is what we suggest. Is chaotically being chaotic and not listening to any of these laws.
There were many jokes about how chaotic the devil's behavior was in this adventure.
I mean, they just set themselves up for us getting the Hell Knights to support us.
Yeah,
even though we were a vigilante organization that had previously been considered to be against the rule of law. Mm-hmm. But we're like, look, I know you think that, and I know this doesn't make any sense to any of us, even us telling you this, but you can detect lies if you want. These devils are causing chaos for no reason.
Mm-hmm. And we are trying to...
We're trying to maintain the rule of law.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to maintain the rule of law and also stop them from just arbitrarily destroying things.
And blowing
things up. Yeah. So at this point, yeah, you guys reached the beginning of that
spiral walk
where you contended with you contended with the Dargentu Veed, that wizard who had been trying to modify those capacitors in the Asmodean knot to give them more power, but yes. The backlash.
Let's just say the Paladins of Shallan were not thrilled that this wizard tortured a Vulpinol into a broken soul Vulpinol.
No, they were not.
I think that may be an understatement of their feelings about this.
I would say that Smite Evil is a good way to state how their feelings were about this. Because Smite Evil they did.
Yes, well, I feel like that Smite Evil isn't a feeling.
What do you mean Smite Evil isn't a feeling?
It's not a feeling. It's an ability.
I think Smite Evil is a feeling. It's the feeling when you look at something and you're like, that's so evil, I'm gonna smite it.
I think Aura of Justice is a feeling.
Yeah, it is.
It's a feeling of frustration for you, the GM.
True. Fortunately, you didn't have that yet.
Not quite.
Not quite. And PC's contended with a bunch of steam methods, which were one of those enemies that you see in a lot of APs that are groups that are there to be atmospheric and to prove that the PCs have gotten stronger.
Yup, the steam method groups. They're like, quick, come onto our platform and purchase games. We're having a summer sale.
Yes.
Or at least they were approximately as dangerous as if that was what they did.
There was a Stygian water elemental, at least. That was kind of cool. It did negative levels.
Yeah, though that was not cool, but...
I liked it.
Because Death Ward did not protect you from the negative levels.
Yeah, it didn't. It was pretty fun, because it was caused by Styx.
There also were a wide variety of rooms with horrific traps in alcoves that also sometimes had treasure or important things that we needed. Mm-hmm. Which, I should introduce everyone to some of our friends that we have been showing up a lot and actually won the summoning duel for me, but we haven't named them yet.
That's true.
We decided that since they're around for minutes per level, that my summoner summons like the same few creatures when she uses her summon spell-like ability.
Yeah, so it's always the same, and they have their own personalities and banter and like different colors.
And so my 1d4 plus 1 Lantern Archons, which I summoned a lot, were like lanterny, glowy, shiny. There were 5 Lantern Archons, and they each had different personalities. Mm-hmm. And so they had to wind up hitting a bunch of traps. Fortunately, they're manifestations of hope, so they were able to deal with being shown scenes from hell. Mm-hmm. I mean, they probably are like, yeah, we know that's what's in hell. We're from heaven.
Yeah, that's why we fight against that.
Yeah. But they wound up hitting a bunch of traps, but they're also very curious and they wanted to see what was in the areas.
I do remember them coming back and giving you a lengthy report. It's like, and then we saw this horrible, horrible thing, and this horrible, horrible thing, and this horrible, horrible thing. And then you guys being like, are you okay?
Yes. All those Lantern Archons, the unsung heroes. Mm-hmm. Also, with Aura of Justice, they do a lot of damage.
That's true.
With their touch attacks. Add the Paladin's level.
Yup. So you guys got through into the. I remember that this final cooling chamber was pretty cool with the floating banquet table and the And the gargoyles that were trying to get you to eat the extremely sketchy feast.
Oh, right, the gargoyles with the sketchy feast. We absolutely did not listen to them.
Yeah.
Was there also, like, randomly an Arcona Rakshasa here?
Yes, there was also randomly an Arcona Rakshasa in the next room. Who had been bound to servitude here.
The least known of the Arcona Rakshasas.
And she had this thing where she tried to, like, create a play with illusions and get you guys to play along, but you guys were like, no.
I mean, I think we actually were okay with it at first until we realized it was, like, we were supposed to be killed. Or that she was, like...
Well, she was trying to get you to waste your attacks so that she could then attack you.
And that she was wasting our buffs.
Yes.
So, we eventually decided not to do that.
Mm-hmm. And then we reached the Hellscape Mirrors, which was the actual place with
the Hellscape Mirrors was the part where the Lantern Archons...
Where the Lantern Archon, we kept looking into the mirrors
I think that you had to look into them because then when you did, you might get a treasure or a thing that you needed.
Yes.
So, normally, obviously, we would not... If we knew there were traps, and Red Black always knows that they're traps... we would not send the Lantern Archons to the traps, but Angel asked the Lantern Archons if they were willing to look into the mirrors to get us the things, because that might be one of the items we needed to for the Liebdogge quest in the mirror, which we were worried about, and they agreed. She's not going to just send Lantern Archons to look into horrible hell mirrors.
Yeah, no, they were like... They believed that they would be better able to psychologically cope with visions of hell than mortals would.
Yep.
Because they had the power of heaven on their side.
Whee! Lantern Archons!
Good a line, friends.
Was there eventually anything that we needed for Liebdogge in one of the mirrors?
Yeah, the Talisman of the Twin was in there.
Yeah, so we were right.
And there was a lot of other treasure too, but the Talisman of the Twin, which is sort of like which... It's the thing that if you let Liebdogge get the talisman back and spend 24 hours with it, he reascends to his power as an Infernal Duke. But if you don't let him get it back, you can totally use it to screw him over in the battle.
We found quite a treasure there in those Hellscape Mirrors.
You did. You fought a bunch of Acherais, which are basically decapitated bird heads running around on bird legs.
Not decapitated. They just have really big heads.
They look like decapitated bird head. Yeah, they look like bird heads.
In that piece of art. We have a mini of one, and it mostly just looks like its head is very big.
Yeah, well, these ones look like heads running around on legs.
Yeah, but that's not... That piece of art is not necessarily what they are.
Yeah, well, that's what these ones look like.
Okay.
And they spew out black smoke.
That's right.
Toxic smoke.
They were, I think, originally from D&D, from the plane of Acheron, which, like... doesn't exist in Pathfinder, but their name still has the Acho.
Oh, that's a good point. Now we know what a chicken with its head cut off is like. And now a new twist on the classic page. Yeah, that's going to be page 45 of part 4 of Council of Thieves for that particular art.
Yes, if you need that.
So, then there was
each of the rooms started, like, having a theme based on different sections or layers of hell.
Yes, because that first one was the Road to Hell.
Yes.
So there was the Hall of Toil. Which was overseen by a Bahir, which you guys, I remember, just defeated instantly.
Yeah, we defeated it instantly. Which is good because they can do like a lot of claw things or a lightning attack.
The gallery of burning lovers, which was
that's the one based on like Moloch, right? Or
yeah, because it has the burning guardian bull.
Yeah, it's got the giant bull.
Yeah, then there was the Forge of the Blood Bargain, where you found an NPC who wound up sticking around with you guys for quite a while. Signatory Vacha.
Oh man, Signatory Vacha, the Kolyrut Inevitable that was just forced to be there by a deal. But we convinced Vacha that the Kolyrut is a pretty powerful inevitable, okay? So they're fairly high level. We convinced Vacha that the fact that like the place was going out of control and there was going to be no pit fiend there in a minute, whether it broke free or we fixed the problem, meant that Vacha like did not have to actually guard the place anymore. and do whatever kinds of... was Vacha also doing some kind of paperwork, or was that only Zamasu?
No, Zamasu was doing paperwork. Zamasu was doing the paperwork there. Well, he was supposed to stay there as long as Leaf Dogger's contract lasted.
Right.
Ready to guard the chamber.
Mostly guarding. Yes. So we convinced Vacha that was unnecessary, but then Vacha wound up having no way to get back to Axis because, in fact, Hollyroots do not have plane shift or anything similar.
However, Vacha did not feel that it would be appropriate to accept charity from the PC. So Vacha decided that the proper and lawful way to do things would be to
work for money because he did not have any money. Work just in total for money. Get a job somewhere in West Crown or with us for money till that he could earn at the appropriate rates, exchange rate for his services, the price to pay the appropriate rate at the Temple of Abadar for a plane shift, and not accept a discount because that would be unfair.
So, but you guys called upon Vacha quite a bit. Like, Vacha will patrol this thing later.
Oh, yeah. Vacha has the ability to change shape into a mortal.
Yes.
So, like, for some reason, Vacha's signature form, when Vacha was sort of, like, fishing for being attacked by enemies on the street, was, like, this petite young woman with, like,
she was a noble woman.
Young noble woman with a fancy umbrella.
Yes. And her fancy umbrella was actually the channel she used for her slam attacks. So you'd see her walking around looking with, like, an expression on her face like she's, like, kind of clueless and in the bad part of town.
Oh, no, I'm in the bad part of town.
And then, like, if anyone came up to her to attack her, she would just, like, kick the crap out of them.
So she not only, he, she, they, it, signatory Vacha.
But they preferred to, like, when they were using a disguise, they preferred for you to
play along with
whatever.
Alright, well, in that case, she, in that form, not only was trying to bait random encounters into attacking her, but also had locate creature at will and certain other things, so it would be locating, like, particular enemies that we were trying to find and sweeping the town, because it has, like, a range of 800, 1,000 feet. So going in a methodical pattern through the town, so always within a 1,000-foot radius, looking for particular creatures or people.
And Vacha did have to switch out the disguise eventually, though, because people
realized that that particular umbrella carrying young noble woman was actually going to be inevitable to kill you.
Yes, but Vacha took on a variety of disguises and generally caused there to be a decrease in crime targeting women in the streets, because criminals learned that it may actually
be random vulnerable looking woman who's walking out after dark might be a CR12 inevitable with enervation.
Yes, that's correct.
But that all didn't happen yet. It's just that signatory Vacha... Eventually, Vacha earned... They earned their pay back to going to Axis to report to their superiors, which they also had no way to do at any time until they went to Axis.
Yes.
But it took a while because we were like, do you not want, like, a different rate for the fact that you're casting your spell abilities, like spellcasting services? And they're like, no, that's just part of the service. I'm going to use the profession rules because it's a professional. It's an occupation.
I decided to interpret things in the way that caused Vacha to get less money, because then Vacha would stick around longer in the PCs.
Because Vacha thought it was that it was more lawful evil to be like, well, you hired my services, and since I have constant airwalk, I'm constantly doing a 280 gold piece spell, so you owe me 10,000 gold pieces.
Yeah, I
know. So anyway, we talked our way past signatory Vacha and even got Vacha to work for us for money. Rico says, I use inductive reasoning to decide if something is bad. Name that sounds like Balaglis, bad. Name with the E's sound bad. Need a control rod, and there's also succubus, bad. Actually, inductive reasoning is good. Abductive reasoning, though, that can be a very good way to determine what's going on when it comes to these issues.
So you made it through.
Deductive reasoning you can't really use in an adventure.
So when you made it through and passed Vacha, you convinced Vacha to let you go by, and you found another person who had been bound into guarding to be bound into service.
Zamas.
Zovaru.
Oh, Zovaru. Right, who's Zamas? A different...
Face Spider from Kingmaker.
It's Face Spider. Yeah, it's Zovaru. It's a different Z.
And another NPC who the adventurer assumes you might attack, whose name starts with Z and is a woman
Zovaru.
and is of a
I think it assumes that you definitely will attack her, doesn't it?
It's very likely. Like, if you do things like looking at her papers or other things like that, it's very easy to trigger that combat. But you guys were perfectly polite to her.
She's obsessed with being able to write her own laws. She was doing archivist for this area, but her dream was to write real laws.
Yeah. And she's basically was talking about how, as a Medusa, she had to deal with a lot of discrimination, and she wasn't really going to be able to have a place in society and do what she wanted to do, so, like, this was the best thing she could do, but she was also bound to service here.
Lainey Axis convinced her to go back to the Temple of Shelon with Krunk-Free's help, where she later redeemed Zovaru.
Yes.
I think actually to lawful good all the way eventually.
Yes.
Eventually. First to lawful neutral fairly
easily because she was kind of on the borderline.
Because there's like what you really love is laws, though.
Yeah.
And then eventually to lawful good.
Yes, but so Zovaru.
She became able to write laws as a one of the people who drafted laws in our administration at the end of the campaign.
Yes, that's right.
Fulfilled her lifelong dream of making real laws and not just archiving papers in the random dungeon.
That was a little bit farther down the road, but I think it's easier to mention these things.
Because we might forget Sanctuary Vacha and Zovaru, so we might as well say, this is what we did with this random monster encounter in the dungeon.
Mm-hmm. And once you made it past,
once you have enough Paladins of Shelon in your group, it just becomes more likely that you're going to redeem someone.
It's basically like, are they an undead or evil outsider? No? Then we're going to try to redeem. That's kind of how it went.
Pretty much.
So you guys easily found your way through the those next series of locks, which was locked by a fairly easy series of riddles.
Ah, yes.
And into the Infernal Engine Chamber.
It's not like Red Black couldn't have unlocked it anyway, but the riddles were pretty easy.
The riddles were pretty easy, so you used those. And you guys had by this point used the library area to figure out what the library area where you'd found Zovaru to do a little research and figure out what the proper shutdown mechanism was. And you put through the steps. The first step here being to deal with Liebdaga's cage.
That's right. Liebdaga's cage was its own separate creature that you had to attack. It had like, I think it was an adamantine cage, and it was very hard to damage it or something like that.
Yeah, it's an adamantine cage that attacked you, and then once the cage was destroyed, you had to deal with Liebdaga himself.
Fortunately, the cage and Liebdaga both individually could be laughing touched, and Carl laughing touched them both.
That's correct.
Because let me tell you something. The AP says, you know what, infernal nukes are a thing. So and they often are based on pit fiends. But let's make this guy so screwed up by his time being a utility that he is much weaker than a pit fiend, even though he's a pit fiend because they're the fourth volume of an AP, and Council of Thieves doesn't even go up to that high of a level compared to most APs.
So it's a reasonable difficulty for ostensibly for the PC.
I mean, but Linda decided let's just throw a regular pit fiend.
Yes, I buffed him a bit.
Not an infernal dude, but a regular pit fiend. But
he still had some of these.
There are some items you can find in the dungeon that weaken him even further than the weakened step block that is already in there. Linda started with a regular pit fiend, but then let us use the modifiers for the things we found in the dungeon.
That's right.
If Carl hadn't rolled high on his check against SR to do Laughing Touch, though, and taken out a round of Liebdaga's actions, I think that we still could have been in deep trouble.
But I thought, given your party composition, that giving
we
you
had
what
enough
was here
smiting.
would not
We had
be
enough smiting, so Liebdaga was defeated. If I recall correctly, you also let Liebdaga come out like at a time when we hadn't completely dealt with some aspects of the cage.
Of the cage, that's right. Yeah, I let him come out sooner.
We actually managed to defeat Liebdaga while some cage elements were still attacking us because they could not be smoked since they were a neutral.
Yes.
Animated object.
Yeah, no. The goal was to give you a fight that felt like you guys are really awesome, and that's why you won. And this guy actually still feels like a pit fiend that you've debuffed with your items, rather than not.
Rather than. He was supposed to be an Infernal Duke.
Yeah.
Which is better than a Pit Fiend, but he was worse than that, and then we debuffed him with our items.
It was more like he's an Infernal Duke, but he's been weakened to be about a Pit Fiend, and then he debuffed
by his utility time, and then the items debuffed him more, and then Carl did Laughing Touch.
So you were able to defeat him.
That's right. And he turned into a massive Lemures back in
massive Lemures back in hell.
Never to be Liebdaga the Twit again.
Yes, indeed. And then you were attacked by a monk.
Suddenly monk.
Yes, on your way out of the dungeon, you were attacked by this optional encounter with a monk because you guys still had some hit points.
Yes.
Fortunately,
it was a monk and not an unchained monk, so it was no big deal.
Aw, regular monks. And that was part 4. So having gone from there's an explosion to we're gonna defeat an Infernal Duke, the PCs are like, okay, finally, we can go after Ilneric.
In Wall Court.
You guys received some warnings about the general danger of vampires from the High Priestess of Shellen, who kind of talked to you guys about her experience fighting vampires and failing. And how worried she was about all the
she's a character Linda made up, but was part of an adventuring party in her youth before she became the High Priestess of Shellen that tried to fight the Shadow Beasts and found vampires and did not all survive.
Part of her group got turned, and then they had to go hunt down their friends who had been turned. And
it was not pretty.
So the PCs also, the Crumfree also had a little bit of a side adventure with her, helping out his own High Priestess, dealing with some of that stuff from her past.
That's right.
And going and finding I think one of them had still been around as a vampire, and then you did a side adventure there. I don't remember quite as well because I don't have the because that's not in the AP for me to easily reference. But
then we went to Wall Court.
Indeed, it was once a social club.
Similar to Walgreens and Walmart, it's Wall Court.
Until the death of Aridin, because so many things went downhill after the death of Aridin. It was guarded, as many places are nowadays.
It's in the Nobles district, which normally is hard to access. That the Dotari are gonna look very suspiciously at any group that's coming into the Nobles district. So we used a scheme involving gondolas, some weird bait and switches. Our one member who was a lesser noble, Tarvi Semaine, and managed to sneak the people that we needed to sneak over into the Nobles district so that we could get to Wall Court. That was a bit of a to-do.
That's right.
But we went in through the sewers, and so therefore, Linda, I think, hasn't always remembered exactly how we challenged these dungeons as well as the role-playing section.
Yes,
so
that's right.
if you were going to go from the beginning, that's not right. We came in through the sewers and fought the tools first.
That's right, yeah. How you handle combats isn't as memorable to me as roleplay. That's certainly true. You're right. You did go in through the sewers and fight the trolls first. Let me find.
Because we thought we would get noticed in the Nobles district on land, but we managed to get to a nearby sewer entrance. And we came in through the sewers.
Oh, yeah. You came in through this tunnel here into F1.
That is right. F1.
Yes. one of those iconic. You enter the dungeon through a sewers tunnel, which leads you to a small underground lake, which abuts an underground dungeon.
Oh. Spoiler alert! There were chools.
There were chools here. And then there were Shadow Mastiffs. So there were still Shadow Mastiffs right at the beginning.
No, there were Shadow Mastiffs. Absolutely
the
were
Shadow
Mastiffs. Yes, but there was so much water that I was able to summon something I rarely summoned before or after. A giant celestial Shamu.
Celestial Shamu! Yes. Celestial Shamu versus Chols.
Yes.
Chols did not get the good end of that.
Yes, Celestial Orca.
I mean, the water is pretty dirty, so Celestial Shamu wouldn't have wanted to hang out there long, but Celestial Shamu was willing to put up with it for a short time.
Yep.
Yes, and you fought a small pack of Shadow Mastiffs down here in a room that had been a guard room, but they stopped guarding it quite so well because what are the chances someone's going to come in through the sewers
and make it through the chools with their paralyzing chool things?
Yes, but so this was kind of more just the area for shadowy creatures to mingle about. So there were the Shadow Mastiffs, but they were also commanded by a Shadow Lord or a Nihiloi, who was the commander of
the Nihilois.
Yes. The commander of the Shadow Army, basically answering only to Ilnaric in terms of controlling the Shadow Beast.
That's right.
This basement area also had vampire spawns, so a lot of these encounters combined into an encounter of just vampires and Shadow Beasts and Nihiloi and just this big giant mess of everything attacking. So,
I mean, it doesn't help that Nihiloi are constantly in telepathic communication with all other Nihiloi within 3 miles.
No, it really doesn't.
That is part of the problem of how it got into a mass of all of the Nihiloi.
Well, the Nihiloi and the vampire spawn and all this stuff,
yes.
So,
we're just lucky they decided to keep it among the Nihiloi area rather than alerting everything in the dungeon.
Yeah.
Mostly because they didn't have a super huge amount of time and they could only get it to the other Nihiloi, and if I remember, there weren't that many Nihiloi.
Yeah, there weren't that many, so they couldn't really coordinate that as well as they wanted.
It was still several encounters from this floor that came and attacked us real quick, but...
Yeah, then there were the vampire spawn, and this place also had more shadows because naturally.
Of course, there's always shadows.
Shadows commanded by a vampire sorcerer.
I mean, shadows have to exist in Pathfinder 1st Edition, so there's a reason to have strength if you're not a strength-based character.
True facts about this.
Or as Han, one of our players, calls his strength score, he calls it his hit points. Whenever we go up against Shadow Dancers, Shadows, the Enfeebling Strike, Rogue Advanced Talent, the Pressure Points, Rogue Talent, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. And this vampire here was was reading. I remember it was reading the 6 Trials of Larazad when you guys came in.
That's true.
Like,
was that was that his consort, the other more powerful vampire that was still around?
Solana.
Solana. Who was...
Yes.
Who was...
Knightly sorcerer.
Yeah, she was a powerful sorceress.
A knightly sorcerer who was...
Because when you were mentioning that in Delvehaven we killed all of his lieutenants, I was like, there was still
Yeah, but Ilnaric was, like, really possessive of her and jealous and was like, you're not allowed to leave this room because vampires make terrible boyfriends.
No, it's really true.
Yep. So...
Have you ever seen a vampire who was not a terrible boyfriend in any medium?
No. I really don't think so. And, and she also had a copy of the 6 Trials that was inscribed with Thessing's name. It's like, how did she get a copy with Thessing's name in it?
Dun dun dun.
But that wasn't revealed to you guys just yet. I don't believe, because I don't think she... I think you saw him later. I don't think she told you.
No, she didn't tell us.
Yeah.
But we did know she'd been doing something involving Thessing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, was there like some kind of weird way to get from her room to or it was probably a vent for her escape in gaseous form. Or
yeah, there's there's a big dry well which she could use to shoot up to the upper floor.
Yep.
Which I think is that how you guys climb? Did you guys climb up that well eventually?
I think you did. But wasn't Ulrich himself very close by?
Yeah, because that well goes up into.
But he's not in the upper area.
Yeah, he's not.
That goes up into Wall-Court, the land of an infinite number of dark stalkers and Council of Thieves mooks.
That's true.
And dark creepers.
Yeah, I believe this was one of the few places where I actually just hand-waved over encounters and was like, okay, here's a few sample encounters.
No, you made us fight them, but we killed them very quickly.
Oh, did I make you guys fight all those?
Yes.
I remember being bored.
Yeah, it was.
I thought I hand-waved eventually, but I guess I didn't.
The lower floor of Wall-Court had cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a Calicang in here somewhere,
yeah, there's a Calicang, but that's on the opposite side. And then there's like the Chamber of Blades traps, which are...
But the upper, the mid, and the very top floor of Wall-Court had a diviner or something. But the middle floor of Wall-Court is like one of the worst dungeon areas that I've seen Paizo publish in terms of variety, in that there's tons of encounters that are all almost the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is that morgue.
There is. But there's just too many encounters that are Council Mooks and Darkstalkers and Dark Creepers.
Yep.
Anyway, though, wasn't Ilnaric very close by to his Nidalee girlfriend?
Yeah, Ilnaric was on, let me figure out where Ilnaric was specifically. Ilnaric was in F14, so over on the other side of that downstairs area. Yeah, so in that secret shrine of Norgorber.
Mm-hmm. I'm also pretty sure that Ilnaric somehow managed to, we definitely saw her just reading the book, but I think that he somehow managed to add to the fight with her and a bunch of other, weaker vampires and shadows.
Yeah.
That he had gathered up, possibly because of the Nihiloi alerting him. Because...
That's right, because he had normally...
It was ground zero for a sunburst.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, because for the Morofall sunburst, and we're gonna use the Morofall.
But he had the ton of tricks which helped protect
him against the Morofall somewhat.
Yep.
Yeah. And he like if you fought him back in his normal room, then he'd have like this trap where he's like also simultaneously drowning a couple of women with his unseen servant.
Oh, he did that.
Yeah.
I think that we eventually had to fight him in there. It's possible that she escaped from the room where we were trying to attack her.
That's right, because now I'm confused, because I thought that did happen.
That definitely happened.
Yeah, okay.
But
so
he brought a lot of people to
That's right. Because his side, he's on the other side of the dungeon anyway, too.
Yes.
So she would have had to, yeah, okay. So you did fight there. I thought he had that.
We did fight him with that.
Because it seemed like one of the... Because I remember this being one of those... when I was reading through this being one of those first examples of the, like... And the villain endangers people to cause some more dynamic
he definitely
things
drowned
happening in
the
the encounter
people.
That I dealt with. But occasionally, because in these early days of GMing, I prepped so extensively, I sometimes have a little trouble with the memory of whether it's something that I prepped and thought through in extreme detail versus like something
she kept a lot of notes but doesn't say exactly what happened when it hit us.
Yes, exactly. Because my notes generally were for were like my preparation.
Now that I think about it, I think maybe we did take her down, but you added some extra copies of Vampire from the Bestiary, which was her stat block, just to the Ilnaric fight to make it harder or something like that.
Yeah. Because I know there was some kind of secret door. It looks like I had added some kind of secret door that connected these two sides, and that must have been how you got through.
But we found Ilnaric with the drowning traps
and his Rod of Shadowy Splendor.
Yes, his Rod of Shadowy Splendor. That was one of our other Rods of Splendor. And as far as we were concerned, Ilnaric Sevenshin was the BBEG of our adventure path. And this Council of Thieves thing is like, oh, that's nice. while they're jerks, they did this really weird thing, and they're fighting each other and whatever. Ilnuric created this shadowy beast that's been here for so long, and our main, like, raison d'etre of our organization is to stop the shadow beasts. And with Ilnuric, we will have stopped the shadow beasts.
So, I didn't have the, so there's this character in the beginning of this part 5, Jarvis Albrecht, who's supposed to come to the PCs and be like, please help me. But the PCs were very much like, we're going straight to Walcourt now. So Jarvis then served the role afterwards of being like, you guys are awesome, please help. So instead of having Jarvis be like all tied up in this Ilnuric stuff, Jarvis came afterwards to start steering the PCs in the direction of the Mother of Flies. And it was very much a like, well, you know, you should care about the Council of Thieves because Ilnuric is part of the Council of Thieves and they have more bad plans.
Didn't some Fae come and talk to us too?
Yeah, there were some Fae who came and talked to you. I think was that where
the red cap?
Yes, there was the red cap dog's tongue.
Dog's tongue, yeah.
Yes.
But we didn't get there quite yet because while we managed to take out Ilnuric and his Kalikang, we did climb up the well.
Yes.
And we fought an endless supply of, and there was like a training area for Council of Thieves mooks. Mm-hmm. We found.
Was this where you found the crate of Council of Thieves standard issue leather?
Not yet. That was in a warehouse in part 6.
Okay. I knew it was some super.
Yeah, because you added content to part 6.
Yes.
That was one of the places you added the most. But we did. There were a lot of traps. We found, I think, Irtane Oberigo, who used to be the second in command of the Loyalists.
Yes.
As well as the corpse of Vasinito Drevenge, the original leader of the Council of Thieves, I think was also on mid-level. Mm-hmm. If I recall correctly. It's been a while, so maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, that sounds right, because they had the council chamber that was there as well. And there was Sandor the Strange.
Yes, he was on the very top floor. Yes. He was a paranoid diviner who put up so many pre-buffs. And he was the reason that some of our divinations couldn't find Ilnuric, because he was always putting private sanctums up on everything, every day, always. And
yes,
he's another person who puts up stone skin every day, always.
Well, he did have access to a lot of resources, I know that I buffed his gear as well. Because if I was gonna have him constantly casting expensive spells, then that's something I do with NPCs. Sometimes with focus NPCs, I tend to boost their gear. At least I did that in first edition quite a bit, so that they would be more on par with the PCs, and then just deal with the fact that my PCs are over-treasured.
Also, we usually ganked a lot of the things that we were fighting, but that Sandor was able to figure out we were coming with his divinations.
Yes.
He always acts on the surprise round. He goes
He was going to try to shadow walk away. But you ganked him, so...
We managed to stop the shadow walk. I think that he may have gone not first, but very early, but we got him with a dimensional anchor because we thought he was going to leave.
You guys just kind of had dimensional anchor as part of your standard operating procedure because you assumed that, like, it might be a devil or something else that has dimensional
I think that, like, almost the only thing that I did in combat was haste and dimensional anchor.
That sounds accurate to my memory. Yeah, this was PF1.
This is Pathfinder First Edition. This was Linda's first adventure path that she ever ran.
This was...
first game for more than just me.
Yeah, this was 10 years ago, which is why my memory is more fuzzy.
Yes, it's 10 years ago. I remember it like it was 10 years ago.
Thanks for gifting a sub there, Trippy. Yeah, so I think those are some of the highlights of the end of part 4 and
end of part 5.
The end of part 4 and then the beginning
giant
of
dungeon at the end of part 5.
The beginning / end of part 5 for our group.
For those of you watching, people online have sort of dissected this AP and suggested that to not throw a giant explosion of pit fiends and distract people who want to take down Ilnuric now that they know where he is in part 3, but to instead run it part 3, Walcourt, then you can do part 4 before the beginning of book 5 with the Mother of Flies.
I think that had I known, I
so
would
that
have
you can do the
like that,
Shadow Beast arc and then the Council arc as like a sort of almost like a mid-season finale for a TV season.
Because then it's like, we solved the problems. Oh wait, there's a giant explosion. I guess this city has more problems.
Yep.
But I had not seen that, and I did not do that.
But by rescuing Irtain Oberigo, we found out all the dirty details of what the Council of Thieves, of what Chamity and Acardrin had been doing, because he was the second in command to Vecinito.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, the corpse of Vecinito really told the tale of what had happened.
Yes, the corpse of Vecinito told you quite a bit. So you guys were able to find out a lot of information about what was going on with the Council of Thieves, which helped you know, which gave you some additional clues when it came to tracking down the Mother of Flies in the first part of the
I mean, she sent an emissary to us, which actually made it easy.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted our help.
Yes, she did.
But I think that guy who came to us first was like, were there like assassinations and they were taking out key witnesses and then taking their tongues and like a portion of their throat so they couldn't speak with dead. And
there was a lot of anti-speak with dead stuff going on here.
So, yeah, that's, but we can get into the Mother of Flies and who that is, the namesake of the volume, and her situation leading into part 6, which was the one that Linda really kind of just did her own thing the most. She turned it into this ridiculously fun, dynamic defend the city adventure, which had a lot of the set pieces from the original part 6, but just in a, sort of a meta of having to constantly be on alert with patrols and be able to teleport in squads to deal with attacks on the city and all sorts of extra stuff that Linda added. But we'll get to that after we do the Mother of Flies.
Yeah, at that point I was a GM with about 2 years of experience instead of a newbie GM. Much of that experience having come through this campaign.
Yep, that's true. Also, I guess between the Mother of Flies and that part 6, we could talk about the time that Carl the Sorcerer convinced us to try to Scribe-Off teleport the BBEG. And how that went.
Yep. Yeah, you guys totally decided to Scribe-Off teleport the BBEG.
But we will get to that on Linda's Adventures, Council of Thieves Part 6. So, let's say goodbye to YouTube.
Bye!
Bye, YouTube! See you next time.